Hello damsels and knights, I'm Sam Godwin, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to discover some history facts that will mess with your sense of time and perception of history. Some facts are well known to many of you, as there are many videos and shorts on YouTube about this topic that repeat the same things over and over again. So I tried to find some lesser-known facts that you might ignore, or to tell some known ones in a different way. Let's start with the first fact. A bar in Ireland is older than the Kingdom of England. The Sean's Bar, located in Athlone, won the Guinness World Record in 2004 for being the oldest still active bar in Ireland. The pub was supposedly founded around the year 900, while the Kingdom of England formed in 927, with the unification of East Anglia, Mercia, Northumbria, and Wessex under the rule of one Anglo-Saxon king, Aethelstan. For more context, at the time of the bar's opening, part of Ireland and a large part of England were ruled by Danes and Norse warriors, better known as Vikings. The Aztec Empire was founded in the same year Joan d'Arc led the Siege of Orleans. The Aztecs are often mentioned in videos about this topic, since many people think that the Aztec Empire was an old empire with a long history before the Spanish conquered them. In reality, the Aztec Empire was less than a century old when Cortés arrived in Mexico. This empire was founded in 1428 when the three city-states of Tenochtitlan, Texcoco, and Tlacopan united their territories. While all of this was going on, in France a teenage girl who had strange visions of God called Joan d'Arc fought and won the Siege of Orleans. This event was the turning point for the French against the English in the 100 Years' War. Italy became a nation in the same year that the American Civil War began. My homeland officially became a united nation in 1861, after the Second War of Independence in 1859 and the Expedition of the Thousands in 1860. Thanks to the immense work and dedication of the Prime Minister Cavour, King Vittorio Emanuele II, and General Garibaldi, all the different states that made up the Italian peninsula at the time were united in one kingdom. In the same year, on the other side of the ocean began the bloodiest American War, that will see the showdown between the Confederate Army and the Union Army, where the generals, Ulysses S. Grant and Robert E. Lee will show their abilities on the battlefield. The USA and the Holy Roman Empire coexisted at the same time. These states are often associated with two distinct and separated eras, but actually coexisted for a period of 30 years. The 13 colonies declared their independence in 1776, and won their war against the British Empire in 1783, while the HRE fell thanks to Napoleon's actions in 1806. So potentially the first president of the USA, George Washington, could have met the last Holy Roman Emperor, Franz II. The fax machine was invented in the same year A Christmas Carol by Dickens was published. Most of us, including myself, think that the fax machine is an invention of the mid-20th century. But in reality, the first prototype of this machine was created in 1843, the same year a guy called Charles Dickens published his famous work, A Christmas Carol. To put it more in perspective, this invention was created before the revolutions of 1848 and Napoleon III, King of France, had in fact a fax machine in his office. New Zealand was colonized by humans while the Black Plague decimated Europe's population. This fact surprised me when I first read it. New Zealand was never settled by humans until the first half of the 14th century when the Polynesians arrived to colonize the island. So while humans were colonizing New Zealand, in Europe we saw the Templar executions, the start of the 100 Years' War, the Pope moving his seat of power from Rome to Avignon, and the plague killing millions of people. Sharks are older than the rings of Saturn. Okay, this fact is really out of nowhere. I think that most of you, just like me, thought that the things in space are very, very old, which is true in some cases, but not when we talk about the rings of Saturn. This incredible creation of the space is only 400 million years old, while the first species of sharks appeared on planet Earth around 450 million years ago, making them older than the rings of Saturn. But this fact is not complete because there are new studies that show that the rings are in fact even younger, being formed around only 100 million years ago. To put in perspective, the Stegosaurus, who lived 150 million years ago, is older than the rings of Saturn. Rome saw the invention of coins and cannons. The history of Rome is long, very long, and this is well known. But this fact is an interesting way to understand how long Rome lasted and how the world changed around it. Rome was founded in 753 BC and the western part of the empire fell in 476 AD, but the eastern part lived until the fall of Constantinople in 1453. To put this in perspective, coins were invented in the 7th century and the first cannons were used in the 15th century. And Rome was there to see these two inventions, especially the last one. Picasso and Snoop Dogg lived at the same time. Here's an artist you'll see often in these types of videos, since Picasso is associated by most of the people with the 1920s and 1930s, but the genius Cubist artist lived a long life after. In fact, he lived for 92 years, from 1881 until 1973. So since Snoop Dogg was born in 1971, for a short period of time, these two artists lived at the same time. Another way to put Picasso's longevity into perspective is to consider that he was born before the Statue of Liberty and died during the Watergate scandal. Nintendo was founded in the same year as the Eiffel Tower was built. This famous company is associated by most of us with the late 20th century gaming industry, but Nintendo was actually founded in 1889 as a card-selling company. In the same year, the Eiffel Tower in Paris was completed. Also, just for more information, in the same year the Mole Antonelliana in Turin was completed, Michelin and the Wall Street Journal were founded, and the Moulin Rouge opened for the first time. The first ever photograph was taken in the same year that Ludwig van Beethoven died. Most people associate photography with the second half of the 19th century and Beethoven with the late 18th century, but these two worlds coexisted for a short period of time. The genius composer was born in 1770 and died in 1827, the same year that a guy called Joseph Nicephore-Niepce took the first ever photograph while he was in London. To put this in perspective, when this photo was taken, Europe was in the period of the Restoration and the president of the USA was John Quincy Adams, who was also the first head of state to be photographed. Mammoths lived at the same time as King Hammurabi. In most videos like this, they repeat over and over again the fact that mammoths were still walking the earth when the Egyptian pyramids were built. Surely is an interesting fact, but I wanted to present it in a different way. But let's explain it first. Most woolly mammoths died right after the end of the last ice age. But in the northern parts of Siberia, some species of mammoths continued to live until around 1700 BC. To get an idea of how long the mammoths lasted into human history, consider this. In the 18th century BC, the newly formed Kingdom of Babylon was ruled by Hammurabi, the king who introduced the first code of law in history. In Greece, we saw the rise of the Mycenaean civilization. The Minoans in Crete built their palaces, and the famous city of Troy was founded. So potentially an Egyptian pharaoh or a Sumerian king could have gone into battle riding a mammoth. The leader of the Fourth Crusade could have met the leaders of the First Crusade. Enrico Dandolo is a very underrated historical figure. He was one of the greatest rulers in the history of the Republic of Venice, ruling the city from 1192 to 1205. He personally took part in the Fourth Crusade and quickly became one of the leaders of this expedition. The interesting part here is the age of Enrico Dandolo when he led the siege of Constantinople in 1204. Being born around the year 1107, he was 97 years old. This means that as a child he could have potentially met some of the protagonists of the First Crusade, like Robert II, Count of Flanders, Baudouin de Bouillon, the first king of Jerusalem, Alexios Komnenos, the Eastern Roman Emperor, Robert II of Normandy. The last Medici to rule Florence died the same year the earliest born person ever photographed alive was born. This is another out-of-nowhere fact. The powerful and rich Medici family is often associated with the Renaissance, but their power over Florence and later Tuscany lasted longer than people think. The last member of this important Italian family who ruled Florence was John Gaston de' Medici, who ruled from 1723 until 1737. Around the same year, on the other side of the ocean, Caesar was born. No, not that Caesar, but this Caesar. This guy was a slave who lived in the state of New York, and he is considered, alongside with John Adams and Conrad Heyer, to be the earliest born person ever photographed alive. This photo was taken in 1851, when Caesar was supposedly about 114 years old. Churchill saw Jack the Ripper and the Beatles. Here's another figure most of us associate only for a certain period of time, in this case, the Second World War. But the English Prime Minister, like Picasso, lived a long life before and after the events that made him famous. Actually, many people don't know that he was an active commander during World War I, where let's say he made some mistakes that caused a lot of people to die. To understand how long he lived, consider that he was a teenager when Jack the Ripper committed his famous murders, and died when the Beatles were revolutionizing the music industry. The Ottomans had an air force. We often tend to forget that the Ottomans lasted until the First World War, despite being mocked by the other nations as the sick man of Europe. So, it's quite strange to associate the Ottoman Empire with the aviation industry, but during the Great War they actually had military airplanes and used it on the battlefield. Sadly, this amazing new invention wasn't enough to save them from the ultimate defeat in their last war. We arrived at the end. Thanks for your time, damsels and knights. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to subscribe, and see you in the next video.